What's going on, folks? Ted from Nerd Immersion here, and we have a D&D community update that came to the form of us of what's being literally called a community update, a new section area of D&D Beyond that we were previously unfamiliar with, that's kind of giving us a roadmap and outlining what we can kind of expect for the future of D&D this year. So without any further ado, let's just kind of jump into this. I will say, if you want to stay up to date on D&D related news and other RPGs and other things, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't. So here we can see D&D Community Update. Welcome to the D&D Community Update, a central location for publishers, creators, and fans to stay up to date on 1D&D playtests, community events, and information related to the SRD and Creative Commons. This page will cover news on community events and information related to the SRD and Creative Commons. If you're looking for updates on D&D Beyond features, see the changelog. Okay, we plan to post updates as they come, rather than on a set cadence. So we have January to March 2023. So this was posted yesterday. This is kind of giving us quarter one of 2023. What to expect in 2023. In our inaugural post, we're providing an overview of what's completed, what's actively in development, and what we're planning for D&D playtests, events, and our support for the creator community. As a note, we won't cover book releases here, as you can find that information in our articles and our YouTube channel. So this will mean things like new books that are coming out, like Keys from the Golden Vault that recently came out, as well as the other books they have planned for 2023. So here we can see, this is kind of the big one. And actually, somebody in a YouTube video suggested, so I'm going to do this. Oops, we're going to leave that where that was. And we're going to go ahead and move my camera to the other side, because they brought up a good point. There's no reason to not put it over here on the left, because it won't block anything. All right, so what's done so far? Added SRD 5.1 to Creative Commons, released 4 playtest packets for 1D&D, collect feedback via 3 surveys for playtest content. All of that is true. That has all been done. Then we have in progress currently, localize SRD 5.1 in French, Italian, German, and Spanish. This will then allow everybody who, again, has those as their native languages, will be able to use the SRD 5.1 that is currently, again, available in Creative Commons. Review previous editions for inclusion in Creative Commons. This is interesting. Again, I covered this in my interview that I did with Kyle Brink, where there is conversations about putting previous editions into Creative Commons. So for those of you out there still creating things for 3rd edition or possibly even Pathfinder 1E that all uses the existing open game license, if those all go the way of the SRD, you'll be protected in that it will live in Creative Commons, something that Wizards of the Coast has no control over. Now, it says previous editions. It doesn't specifically state previous editions with SRDs. This was also something that I covered in that interview where I had brought up the concept, well, what about 4th edition? What about 1st and 2nd edition? Potentially, we might get all of those into Creative Commons. It just really depends on the logistics of developing. Some of those don't have an SRD, so they'll have to develop one first. Let's see, publish our internal content policy for D&D products. This is something, again, we touched on in that interview, which is a lot of us during the whole OGL situation were debating that one of them, the versions of the OGL had, what was more or less being discussed as a morality clause. This is essentially what this is going to be about. D&D Wizards of the Coast recognize that they can't police the morality of the people that are producing products, but they're going to say this is the sort of conduct policy that we as Wizards of the Coast and our people are going to follow, and then you can use that as a judgment to gauge what you're going to produce, and then update the D&D core rules. Now, I'm assuming where it says update the D&D core rules, that is to update them to 1D&D. I don't imagine that this is something unique that we haven't heard of before that's just coming out of nowhere. And then it says upcoming over here. I'll zoom it in a little bit for you. Ensure 1D&D updates are compatible with 5th edition and the SRD. Again, this was something that Kyle brought up in that interview as well, was that a lot of us thought that 1D&D or whatever the future of the game was going to get its own OGL and possibly be controlled by Hasbro or whoever to kind of be able to make the most money off of it. But Kyle assured me in that interview, and it is kind of corroborated here, that they are planning to make whatever updates they make to 1D&D in the future will be as backwards compatible as it can be to 5th edition, which depending, that has a couple of different ways that could go. We'll have to just wait and see. This could be making a transition document that again gets uploaded, put in Creative Commons or what have you, that says, hey, if you want to convert this 5th edition thing to 1D&D, this is how things convert. Some could be pretty simple, like if something references race in 5e, it would be converted to species in 1D&D, or if you wanted to go species back to race like that, that's how that would work. Or it might just be wholesale taking rules and updates from 1D&D and just dropping them in Creative Commons. Whatever it needs to happen will happen. Okay. And then we talked again a little bit about done, right? We go over this here. Nothing really crazy to go over there. Localize. Later this year, SRD 5.1 will be translated into a multitude of languages. Before adding previous editions into Creative Commons, we need to review the materials for any potential exclusions to preserve the D&D brand. For example, we would not want to unintentionally release Tiamat or Vecna brand elements under Creative Commons. Similar, I'm assuming, to what they did with the 5th edition one by releasing Strahd von Zarovich into Creative Commons. They don't want to make Vecna something that anybody can use. Again, you can't use like Vecna as the stat block unless they put Vecna stat block in Creative Commons. But if you somehow use the word Tiamat or Vecna into, put that into Creative Commons, anybody can use that. They can use it for whatever they like. Publish our internal content policy for every adventure. Every adventure should feel welcome at the table, and our internal content policy helps ensure D&D products reflect that mission. We are updating and publicly releasing this document so you can see our standards. And then update the core rules. Feedback on materials for the future player's handbook are ongoing. We're closely tracking your survey responses. Later, you get to play with and provide feedback on content for the next iteration of the DMG and the Monster Manual. Upcoming, we plan to keep the rules updates compatible with content you've enjoyed since the release of 5th edition. In the same way, we will ensure that the SRD for 5th edition remains compatible with the rules updates, either bringing those updates into the SRD or providing... Okay, so basically, I didn't read further ahead. Everything I said is what's corroborated here. 1 D&D playtests. Our playtests for the next version of the Player's Handbook include revisions of all the 2014 Player's Handbooks, 48 subclasses, revised species, new and revised backgrounds, new and revised spells, new weapon options for certain classes. It seems that it'll likely be the warrior classes based on what we saw in the priest playtest that just recently came out, but we'll see. Expect to see new versions of previously released playtest materials. Again, as they're iterating on this, we'll see updates. I have a future video coming out on some thoughts on that as well. Following playtest for the new player's handbook, we'll explore more materials for the DMG and the Monster Manual. 2023 community events. Now, this is really surprising. This is another thing that I was brought up in the course of that interview, was that if you really want to show that you're all about the community, then maybe you should actually make a presence and go out and be in a formal capacity at things like conventions or host your own or something along those lines. Because for a while now, Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons hasn't really had a formal presence at any major convention. And it seems like that's going to be changing this year in a pretty substantial way. All right, below is a list of events we've made plans for the year. So it says D&D Direct. Get the latest on D&D products, games, and more. Where online? When? March 2023. It is March 2023 right now. Now, I mentioned, I did the short video on this. Some other folks have talked about it. There's the first ever D&D online creator, or the D&D community... D&D Content Creator Summit, rather, is happening on April 3rd. So this is happening in April. I'm going to be going out there to learn about that, but apparently, sometime between now and then, we will be getting a D&D Direct. Now, this actually tracks with what happened. I believe it was either called the D&D Direct or D&D Presents last year, was when they announced Spelljammer and then also Dragonlance. I remember this very specifically because I was at PAX East and I went back to my hotel to live stream the reaction to whatever they were doing. It's going to be that. I'm assuming it's going to be that again because that just seems how it works out. So sometime within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to get an online D&D Direct. I'll be sure to cover more information on that once we have something. All right. Event: Learn to play, your adventure begins. Experience D&D for the first time at your local game store with a short adventure. Wizards Play Network stores in the US and Canada. This is set for the second weekend in April, April 6th to 9th. So that's actually pretty cool to see. This is a way to just teach people how to play D&D, similar to how like other card games and other things have like intro weekends or intro missions, or I've seen with a Pokemon card game, for example, I've seen where they'll go out and they'll do like they'll kind of walk people through how you go turn by turn to understand the rules to then like let people go and play by themselves. Seems like that's what this is going to be. DM Camp: Dungeon Mastering is for everyone. Game stores will receive kits to help players learn the ropes of being a DM. Again, Wizards Play Network stores in US and Canada set for summer of this year. Again, they're calling it a camp, so this is again the idea of like a summer camp to teach people to be DMs. In April, you're going to learn the basics of the game, and then it looks like in the summer, they're actually going to teach people how to actually DM the game. Then we have UK Games Expo, D&D Learn to Play Spaces and more to be announced in Birmingham, UK. That's June 2nd to 4th. We have Comic-Con International. This is San Diego Comic-Con. D&D Play and Learn to Play Spaces, July 19th to 2020 to the 23rd, 2023. They'll be at Gen Con in Indianapolis, which is interesting. They haven't been in a formal capacity to Gen Con in quite some time. Now, it does say what's happening is to be announced. I will be at Gen Con, so we'll see what can happen while I'm there. Fan Expo Canada in Toronto, Canada in August. Also nice to see that they're not just doing the US. We have UK and Canada in here. We have Big Bad Con in California, September 28th to October 1st. We have Family Friendly Build a Community Together. Join your local game store in inviting kids to the D&D table with exclusive kits for family play, set for fall 2023. Geek Girl Con in Seattle. Gamehole Con in Madison, Wisconsin, and then PAX Unplugged whenever that happens in December of this year. So this is pretty interesting to see them basically. I mean, I think we obviously know that they're kind of in a rebuilding phase, right? This was kind of one of the main focuses of. Oh, I'm so sorry if that's going off in the background. Currently, this is what we've kind of seen going on. It's corroborated in a bunch of the different interviews and things, is that they need to rebuild trust with the community. And honestly, one of the easiest ways to do that would be to get yourself out there and allow people to talk to you and be able to speak about things freely. When you kind of live in an ivory tower in Washington and no one can get a chance to speak with you or talk to you about stuff, it kind of makes it seem like you've got something to hide. You're now going to be out there like so many other RPGs have been at conventions doing the circuit. Yes, I understand Dungeons and Dragons is probably the one of, if not the most recognizable TTRPG out there amongst the sea of all the other ones that exist. But just because you have that doesn't mean you should forget where you came from. And you should go out there and you should meet with fans. These concepts of doing these learn to play, learn to DM. These are a really good concept. I like this. This is a good idea. You're getting people into the game, teaching them all about it. And you're going out to showcase what's going on and be present at conventions, whether it's just like these are a whole bunch of tables that we brought with just DMs to run games or just a free play space. Are you going to be there doing live streams? Are you going to be there doing panels? All of these we don't know. A lot of this is to be announced, but for some of the other conventions, it does say that they're basically doing learn to play spaces and potentially a little bit more. We see this with Magic the Gathering. We'll have different events where it's like, here, learn to play Magic. Maybe you get a free deck, stuff like that. So, and then again, more importantly, sometime in the next couple of weeks here, we're going to have a D&D Direct that's going to give us more information on the latest products we can expect. I will be doing my absolute best to cover that as best I can. I'll probably be doing a live reaction live stream if I'm able to. And then again, I guess they don't mention it here because it's kind of outside of the scope of this, but then the end of March is also when the D&D movie releases. So, this is, I regardless of how you feel about Dungeons and Dragons and Wizards of the Coast, a lot of us, myself included, as many others, really lost a lot of trust, lost a lot of favor, and some people have written everything off related to Dungeons and Dragons completely and said, we're done. We're moving on to other RPGs. I'm never looking back. Some of you never left, and some of you are kind of like, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'll see what's going on, but I am still going to consider to pursue a thing. And you know what? Whatever way you go about this, you're entitled to your opinion. You're allowed to do and play whatever you want, right? No one can do that. The games are yours anyway. But ultimately, I think we can all agree that what they're attempting to do here is transparency and is the opportunity to tell you what's going on. Now, again, we'll have to see actions speak louder than words for sure when it comes to all of this. So we'll have to see what's coming as things develop, but I will continue to cover it. It's nice to see that they are planning to kind of give us seemingly quarterly updates on what's going on, what's in progress, what things are happening for the future. Again, this is continuing to double down on a lot of the stuff they announced around the publishing into Creative Commons, saying, hey, these things are going to change. We see a lot of that here. And then again, we also have stuff like we know that they're going to be out there teaching people how to play, supporting local game stores, which is another thing I didn't touch on, but Wizards Play Network stores are getting these exclusive weekend events. That's more support for local game stores than I feel like we've seen from Wizards of the Coast, at least on the D&D side of the house, for quite a while. And then they're also going to be out there at conventions. In what capacity, some of that still remains to be seen. So let me know what your thoughts and opinions are in the comments down below. I'll see you all next time.